Hello? Okay, yeah, it's working. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Castalia. This is the University of Washington's MFA in Creative Writing monthly reading series. My name is Tim, and I'm one of the hosts. And Rachel's down here, and she's the other host. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Hugo House for letting us meet here, especially Kristen at the front desk. Our bartender tonight is Drew. She's over here. Please get a drink and tip generously. And also we have books by UW faculty and alumni in the back that you can purchase. And then also on the tables you should find a Hugo House survey, and they would appreciate it if you took some time to kind of fill that out really quickly. Other than that, if you have parked in the Hugo House parking lot, please remember to move your car by 10 o'clock. We should be done before then, but that's kind of the cutoff. And then we have 3 student readers tonight, graduate students in the MFA program. Then we'll have a brief 10-minute intermission, followed by 1 alumni and 1 faculty reader. So we'll get started now. How about? All right. Yeah, I put "take a drink" on my. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a long enough pause to show the separation of like the things. So. All right. So our first reader tonight is Daniel J. Cecil, a first-year prose student currently working on a novel about cult leaders, obsession, and steamy European threesomes.
That's right.
His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in various magazines and literary journals, and he has worked as an editor for Versal, a literary and arts journal from Amsterdam. He lives here in Seattle with his wife Frenska and his dog Cleveland. And I will now depart from what has heretofore been a purely factual and unbiased introduction to announce that you should all visit Daniel's website, www.writerdanielcecil.com, not to be confused with www.writerdanielcecil.com, which is a men's footwear emporium. But Daniel's website is a marvelous website, very crisp and pleasing to the eye, with black Helvetica font buoyed atop a soft eggshell background, exuding the very texture of milkiness, and beautiful red links. Don't get me started about the red links. I have never had so much fun clicking on a red link or being directed to a page full of red links. It is as if I am reading the words of Christ in hypertext. Anyway, Daniel, please come regale us with your fine writing, and also your website makes me sweat.
It's true about the foot emporium. That's true. That's true. Hello, everyone. How are you tonight? Lots of looking good. No, I'm sorry. I'm not that guy. Anyway, so tonight I'm going to read a story from a book I've been working on for a very long time with a friend of mine, Ricardo Lay, who's a Portuguese graphic designer, and we've been writing and designing a book about tables, tables of all kinds. And this particular story is in honor of Valentine's Day, and it's called Objectophilia. The love of objects. You know where this is going. So, Objectophilia. The first time was Kentucky Coffee Wood. Early summer, I'm sure. I was camped near a tractor-drawn lake in Brewster. My girlfriend at the time dragged a side table from the cabin we were staying in. The table's top was shined with hand-rubbed oil, and she pulled that beautiful table right up to the fire so that we could play cards under what she called the dizzy spell of psilocybin. It was hot, and because it was Ohio, dark clouds stacked like mountains in the sky. It began to rain, and our shoes filled until they broke water, and we danced on the graves of the Miami, because we had that in us back then. And with a wave of my hand, the rain stopped, and for that reason and others, it was a holy night. Later, we set our lawn chairs around the table to dry our sockless feet by a fire that never went out, and while the others chattered and kissed and groped flat chests under champion cotton tees, I massaged that table, that Kentucky coffee wood, with my feet until they were raw, until I was chewing on my shirt to muffle the moans. I will say this, a table caresses when you're properly attuned to it, listen and believe. The first meeting with anything that's good or bad is when you're most impressionable. And if you are susceptible to its pull, you're very likely captured forever. Life is tricky that way. You get a taste of something, you dedicate yourself to it, and you only realize down the road that everything has changed forever and that it hasn't changed you for the better. And in that sense, I dropped out spiritually, and I became an other. I withdrew from Wright State, and before my paperwork was filed and the ink had dried, I was knocking on the door of Jan's Woodworking, which was and is, I think, the only shop of its kind in the tri-state. And it was my good luck that he hired me on the spot, and I became his apprentice. I learned to plane, to strip rubber, to properly apply a call, to climb cut, to execute a dovetail. Jan watched me and admired my dedication, the way in which I leaned close to the wood with my eye almost touching the grain, my breath shooting sawdust into a beautiful cloud. I was made for it. He told me that. When Jan gave me a key to the shop to say, "Job well done," I thought I would flip backwards like a wind-up toy. I worked long hours, and the more I attended the shop, the greater my passion grew. And I was no longer thinking of Brewster Lake and the callous skin on my feet. I was thinking, how can I take this further? So it was my third month on the job after hours that I found myself lying naked on a table with the lights out, where I fell asleep. When I woke to see Jan in the door, framed in sawdust speckled with light, I began to cry, and Jan looked at me with confusion and disappointment. Bye-bye, apprentice. I tried to find another woodworking shop on the tri-state, but they were hard to find, and I found looking for help that everyone knew Jan, and subsequently everyone knew me as well. Instead, I got a job at a furniture store and found a cheap apartment, but I was collecting tables as fast as my meager cash flow would allow. My roommate, fed up with the living room now overflowing with coffee and pedestal tables, workbenches and ends, threatened to throw one of my favorites away, this little teak dream I had picked up from an estate stale. When he tried throwing her out the window, I hit him over the head. It was an accident. There was a wet crack and my roommate dropped like a goddamn sandbag. One of those quick collapses of weight that makes you go, uh-oh. Oh, fucking oh. So I fled. And the first evening on the run, I rested at a roadside motel, and I contemplated how this irrationality, this love for physical objects, these tables, they had ruined me. What was once a fleeting fancy had become something more, something dark and consuming. Those were the days you could change a name easy, and I did, and I made my way to the West Coast. But have you looked around? Tables. Tables. Tables are everywhere. So I became a shut-in, made my apartment as Spartan as possible, but we all know that abstinence and addiction comes stronger thirst. And I was lonely with a big L. I couldn't take sitting in that bare studio all day on my own, nothing to rub against. But I was trying to be serious about taking this table habit. So I got with a Hare Krishna. She, of all people, wouldn't give me grief about not having furniture. No way. For her, it would all be about holiness, baby, and fucking. Holiness and fucking. That suited me just fine. But that too quickly became tiresome. In an attempt to keep things at the very least civil, we bought a television, excusing the purchase, as it did away with the silence that caused the battles. And one night, after a particularly fearsome one, my Christian and I watched a documentary about men who, for lack of any better interest, got a kick out of owning lifelike sex dolls. And these men treated their dolls as if they were living girlfriends, buying them wigs, makeup, expensive jewelry. In a scene towards the end of the documentary, one of the men, a pockmarked fellow with a Russian doll named Ivana, dined with this girl in the candlelight. He held her hand, looked into her eyes, and cried as the camera captured his crinkled red cheek. "I can't live without her," he said. And as the camera took advantage of his break in stoicism, all I could think was how damn delicious that kitchen table looked draped in that flickering candlelight. And as I watched the table hungrily, as the documentarian's voice named these men's fascination objectophilia, saying that word in a neutral gray tone that did nothing to hide the narrator's disgust, as my heart just laughed and laughed, I felt that sandbag feeling fall right into the middle of my chest with an oh, fucking oh. I did like her in a way, my Krishna. She was sweet and quiet, and always willing to lay as flat as I asked, as motionless as a desire. This is a character, everyone. This is Hold your horses. So that motionless as a desire, that was good enough for a time. So it was sad that shortly after watching that documentary, my Krishna ditched the long tunics and let her hair grow out to bob length. And she started buying expensive cold-pressed juices and expressed a desire to go to oyster bars in Midtown. And pretty soon we had a few things in the house besides the television, even a bench, which I sometimes imagined was a table. And it was during this transition from mute fame to expressive demand that Mahari left her flock and started attending these $10 pottery classes where she met a pair of yuppie hipsters. The duo, who lived in central Spokane, after a few discussions during the class, found ancestry with Mahari in the Krishna faith, and they too were lapsed. Mahari invited them over for dinner, plus one. A little time out of the apartment would do us some good, she said. And it was true that things had become even more strained than usual between Krishna and me. I blamed her for not curing me of my obsession as if it were a job, and naturally, she resented me for my short temper, even though she was too easygoing to admit it. The couple, Sarah and Jack, instead invited us over to their place. Sarah, with her flower dress and clear plastic glasses, he, with rolled jeans and braided beard, opened their door to us smiling with the whitest chompers I'd ever seen. They fawned over our vegan lasagna. It was months since I was last forced to engage with people beyond Hari and the demands of my job. I was ready to run. But what did I see behind Sarah and Jack? Sat statuesque in the living room, a Thomas de Lusac cocktail table. The same beautiful specimen I'd once drooled over an issue of contemporary furniture during a weak moment at Borders. The Lusac table. Its caramel brown surface and sloping angles pitching in the middle, pleasantly invoking infinity, its body illuminated by the setting sun pouring in through the French windows. I was compelled to behave like a hauling ass through dinner, guffawing in some pathetic show of enthusiasm for a host's jokes to stay in their good graces. I did everything to prolong the evening. To leave was to be away from the Lusac. Dinner was barely over and I was discussing plans for another date. We set up more of these dinner parties. It is doing us so much good, isn't it, dear? Mm-hmm. And though I wanted nothing more than to punch all of them, Hare Krishna too, and their collective wrinkle-free vegan faces when they discussed their shallow politics or showed their petty hypocrisies and disgusting lack of substance, I generated good joy, convincing everyone else to just stay a little bit longer, to have that one last drink, all the while moving everyone slowly into the living room so that I could be near my lovely Lusac. On one of these nights, I slid the shoes from my feet and put my soft toes on top of the innerfit. And it was a crossing of borders. My heart raced, and I was feeling climax when my host surprisingly told me, "Get those off right now." I was flustered by Sarah's commanding tone, and even though she tried to explain away her short temper, my feet damaged the finish of the table. This did nothing to quell my embarrassment, and the anger came with it. And like anyone else when confronted, I did something irrational, something foolish and dangerous. I slipped a spare key for the apartment from the wooden rack by the door and pocketed it once Jack and Sarah's back were turned. At first I had no idea what my intentions would be. What was I going to do with that key? It weighed a ton as I fiddled with it at work, at the bus, during jogs. Soon, however, an opportunity presented itself. Sarah and Jack, said Mahari, were planning to take a long overdue holiday, all the way to South Africa. Isn't that convenient? Doesn't that sound nice? They would be gone for nearly a month, they said over the phone, a last-minute deal. When the day of their vacation arrived, I took the STA across town, my heart beating with the track, and let myself into Jack and Sarah's apartment. Once inside, I took my time. I sprayed my clothes with their perfumes and colognes, burnt incense, raided the fridge. All this before crawling to her, the Lusac, on my hands and knees. And at first I toyed with her. I flirted. I set coasters on her curves, put warm drinks on top of her finish to loosen her reservations, moved the books nestled in her openings to expose her, to try and find the right aesthetic composure. Only then did I offer my feet. Not bare feet, not at first. But I placed my cleanest socks in the middle, just hoping for a reciprocation, and oh, there it was. It was only on my third visit that I removed my socks, let my lint-covered toes hold her, my lower lip curled between my teeth. My vision purpled, and I found my clothes in front of the television in a pile, and I found myself lying face down on her. Of course, I called my Harry the next day. It was over. I didn't even give her time to cry before hanging up. In the morning, I hatched a plan. I would put on my clothes and make my way downstairs. I would stop a stranger on the sidewalk. Will you help me? And convince that stranger to help me maneuver the Lusac down the stairs and into my van, where I would cover her in the softest blankets I could find. I'd pay the stranger $50 at this time. The stranger would say thanks and move along, but deep down, the wallet just a little bit thicker. And once loaded in my car, I would drive the Infinite to a storage shed in Wellington. And unlike the other tables in that dry, soulless place, those tables I can forget and put out of sight, I would not be able to resist visiting the Lusac during my lunch breaks. I would lie inside her curves, dreaming of different circumstances. I would think of my childhood neighbor, Jeff, standing in his driveway, waxing his SS Chevelle in the summer with his eyes closed. I would dream of the woman I see at the grocery store every Thursday, her hand tucked into a sleeve of cookies before the checkout, her other hand holding a phone so close to her face that her cheeks glowed irradiated. I will, in those daydreams, tell myself that those people disgust me to the core, and then, in my darkest hours, I will consider how I am much more like them than they would ever like to believe. Thank you.
All right, our last student reader tonight is Michelle Hope Anderson, a second-year prose writer whose work centers around the grotesque. But not the kind you're thinking of. I mean grotesque like really elaborate ancient Roman shit on the side of a building. Or like an unrequited lover morphing into a book that's also in your hands. Or how a solitary lemon contains within its waxy sheen a disillusioned beauty. Michelle works in the medium of enchantment. Now, I hate to get too sentimental up here, but I owe Michelle a great deal. She was the first friend I made in Seattle after moving here from a tiny town in northern Idaho. And she befriended me even though I ran around with a rabid look in my eye, as nervous as a right-wing terrorist. But I didn't end up Thelma and Louising myself on the cliff, or worse, moving back to Idaho. And I feel that is due in no small part to my friendship with Michelle. I used to think I had no need for grace, but life has taught me otherwise. So everyone, please welcome Michelle Hope Anderson to the stage.
Tim, there's still time for that Thelma and Louise thing. Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to read something that I started writing this summer when I was in Rome with UW's in a writing program. So here's a nod towards Kevin Kraft, who's reading later, who was a teacher there and was one of the people that helped teach me how to write prose more like a poet. So here we go. Yeah. You know what?
Yeah. Drink like one, too.
Okay. Appropriately, this is called 9 days in Rome. Day 1. She wandered through the city, hobbling slightly from an ankle tweaked on shadowed cobbles, the sun cracking like egg yolk over rust-colored roofs. Rome that morning was an empty bench, so she stopped to sit on the smooth, cold marble in Piazza Navona, an extravagant oblong with more statues than pedestrians, pulling her calf across her knee and massaging her ankle as she watched a single man in a brown tweed suit unlock his Vespa, swing his leg across it, and after pulling at the knot of his tie to tighten it, turn sharply into an alley and speed out of sight. She followed that alley to the slabs of stone above the Tiber, where she dangled her feet over the edge and watched the water until its movement stilled into one fractured image. She stopped again to press her back to a burnt orange building before the sun could warm it, stopped to sit on the dusty steps up to a fountain, the cobblestones around her collecting cigarettes like moss. Stopped to try to see Rome alone before the heat of afternoon, before the mother turned the steps to lessons with her toddler, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Before the buskers, the vendors, the restaurants opening their shutters like sleepy eyes, before the tourists swarmed and pushed her to her feet like ants on a picnic blanket, and she had to wander back. Rome was an empty bench. Day 2. She let the water run down her chin here. When she filled a bottle from a fountain, fire hydrants with elephant trunks pointing downward, she let the water splash her feet. She liked to get soaked here, with Rome's rain like a camera flash, sheets of sudden water framed by whatever archway she ducked under, lightning that made her count until the thunder came and then she had to start again from 1. She liked to watch the streets dry like a Polaroid in minutes, liked how the city was as thirsty as she was. That night she watched the drain drip off the balcony down to the cobblestones, and saw how, between the rocks, grass grows. Day 3. When he got there the next day, she couldn't navigate Rome the way he wanted her to. She steered by the remembered smells of crushed basil and sun-warmed strawberries in the ground when the outdoor market closed. But where was it, he asked, which street? She told him it was near the Cartolleria, told him how thick the paper was there, how smooth the leather was, leaving oils on her fingers before the shopkeepers shoot her out for touching. But she couldn't tell him where that shop was or how much the gelato cost outside when the sun was fully in the sky and she found a spot of shade to stand in and let the limone melt onto her tongue. Her favorite light was in the early morning, and she wanted to show him that light sinking into the Tiber. What time should I set my alarm for, he asked. Just after the birds start screeching in the street, she said, when they echo off the quiet before everyone else is up. Show me on a map, he said, and she said, follow me. Her favorite place was the Forum after the tourists had left for the day, climbing up the Palatine Hill past ruins and reading the rocks aloud just for the way the Latin sounded in her mouth. Tell me what it means, he said, and she said, can't you see? Day 4. Look at this, he said. The guidebook says the museums are less crowded in the morning, so they could sit by the river later. But at the first museum, their footsteps echoing across empty marble, she knew they paid too much to see those frescoes. 10 euros spent on faded mist and trompe l'oeil she had to try to fall for. They're lacking something, she said. Those gods shackled in the strips of fresco so far up the wall she had to stretch her neck to see. Outside, she pointed at a bush and said, maybe that's Daphne. Maybe it's Ami Mori, she said, pointing at the fountain. Helios, pointing up. And there, that's Echo chasing bird calls down the cobblestones. But she couldn't tell if he was looking, his whitewashed shape bent over the guidebook again. He'd started disappearing over the last few months at home. First, the lines on his skin had smoothed out, the ones around his mouth that had always pulled her into a smile like a boomerang, and then the outline of his body had started to lose definition. She couldn't always separate him from the background of their one bedroom anymore, his body blurred against exposed brick and rain-damp windowsills. She thought the light in Rome would redefine his features, that she'd be able to see him better here. Come on, he said, not looking up from the map. Let's go to the Capitoline next. Day 5. She liked how the city was detailed and layered like Italian desserts were, like the dense pastry she'd bought as they walked to the basilica, its crust cracked and crushed nuts stacked like bricks in the center. She'd read that Augustus had founded the city in brick and turned it into a city of marble. But when they got there, the church's walls were stripped back to brick, like frosting on a cake licked off. In the dark, cool underground ruins of an earlier church where God was slightly older, she noticed that torches were encased electricity, no open flames. She missed the way the fire would have moved like ghosts over the stones. She tried to reach for his hand, guide him down another level to where Mithraic worshippers had split bulls' throats open over the stones for their gods, but she couldn't find him in that dim electric glow. But when she turned her head, she could see, down a hallway of repeated archways, how that little light made the pebbles on the ground look like fallen leaves. She could see how it used to be. Ivy growing up arches, swifts, the sun turning columns to caramel, a cardinal walking in bright red robes, passing a precise row of nuns. But now it was dark, two-toned, the archway leading back to a black mouth. Day 6. Tell me something, she said. She was lying on the bed, stomach pressed to white linen, curtains drawn over 4 p.m. light, her feet, still dusty from a day's worth of Roman dirt, hanging over the side of the sheets. What do you mean, tell you something? What? He said. He was sitting up, the outline of his knees pulled into his chest, his body now opaque and gauzy like the white curtains, the white sheets. She'd heard him rinse his feet off in the bidet in the bathroom, but she didn't ask him if you knew what you're supposed to do with that porcelain. Anything, she said, something interesting, just something I don't know about you. He grabbed an apple from the side table, the bright red blooming in front of him like a bullet hole. You know I'm bad at stuff like this, he said. She looked at the white light trapped in the gauze of the curtains and said, well, I masturbated in the bathroom of the Castalia Museum. We were there the other day. He turned the apple over in his palm. The one with all the frescoes, he said? No, the one after that, with the famous Romulus and Remus sculpture, the wolf. The one with all the naked statues of those gods and emperors, she said. He brought the apple towards his lips and bit through the skin, juice misting the sheets. You did not, he said. Day 7. She sat on the lip of the hotel pool and sunk her feet into the water. Leaning down between her knees, she cupped a liquid mirror in her palms and stared back at her fractured reflection, wondering if this is how he saw her, if he saw her. She tried to remember the last time he touched her. It must have been a few days back, she thought, in one of the museums. He'd placed his hand on her waist, and without looking, she'd automatically moved to the side to let someone by. But there hadn't been anyone there, and he just dropped his hand and walked on to the next room. He hadn't tried to touch her since then, and now she was wondering if he still could. His body was becoming translucent, as solid as the lake glinting off the water. She felt the dust and dirt on the tiles around the pool stick to the back of her legs, stick to the pads of her wet fingers, feeling the grit across her skin, Roman grit, dirt that Caesar may have scraped off his body with a strigil, dirt that may have mushroomed up behind the gladiator's sandal, that Michelangelo may have swept off his more expensive paints, that Fellini may have wiped from a camera lens. She looked across the water as it collected the last of light like honey, water so thick it looked solid, water pressed with a heaviness it hadn't had an hour ago when they'd been at the pool together, an expansiveness it hadn't had when the sun was fully in the sky and she'd had to cup her hand against her brow to try to see him as he swam laps, racing an old dog to the other side as it lumbered back and forth with him, his whitewashed form waiting for it at the end and petting it before he pushed off and swam back towards her. Day 8. The Vatican made her angry. The museum was a long oblong, a racetrack lined with marble statues that popes had stolen over centuries, castrating them with chisels and covering the holes they left with plaster fig leaves. An angry woman must have been given this job, the tour guide said, laughing at his own joke. Near the Sistine Chapel, the top end of the loop, she lost him in the sprawl of their group when the guide rushed them through rooms and rooms of modern art. I don't know why anyone would want to look at this, the tour guide said. The Dalis and Matisses, the Van Goghs and Picassos. In the small chapel, her limbs pressed up against the neon jackets of a Danish couple, she blinked the art into focus. Every surface technicolor like a coloring book. Panels of Moses and Mary and a muscled Jesus. Men in black uniforms and straight spines shushed the new group, shushed their whispers and their shifting feet, God's security guards. But the silence was broken after a moment by the slow gathering of voices like a cicada lull. She'd almost lost him earlier when he brought her out at the last of the Roman daylight, telling her the night tours would probably be less crowded. She could barely see him on the walk through the winding streets to the Vatican, and she'd had to follow the sound of his footsteps and the soft shadow he cast over the fading light on the cobblestones. And now she couldn't find him in the crowd of bright clothes and selfie sticks. She was alone in a chapel so crowded that the bottom of Michelangelo's blue mural, Heaven and Hell, was covered by the heads of tourists. And she had this feeling, this certain feeling, that nothing in the world in person could live up to the fairy tale. On the loop back out, she let herself be pulled by the tide of exiting tourists. Vatican employees had set up booths selling plastic rosaries and DVDs about the Pope. Fold-out faux wood tables stretched out in front of the less important frescoes. It felt like Main Street Disneyland, the gauntlet of shops as you enter and leave. Maybe the same Chinese manufacturer made those rosaries, those Mickey Mouse ears. Mementos promising happily ever after. She couldn't find him outside amid all that color, so she walked back to their hotel alone, waiting to hear his footsteps catching up behind her. As she fell asleep, she heard the soft groan of wood, the door opening maybe, or the walls stretching, and felt the wind gather in the curtains, then release over her skin, like a caress. Day 9. She went to see Nero's old villa alone, where the emperor had poured sand over sea to build a channel for boats from Rome. The ruins were 2 feet tall, a blueprint in fragments. Perhaps, if she stared long enough, the bricks would restack like spines, fusing together until the buildings expanded into Hercules' broad back, until her footsteps echoed off his marble skin, until that marble covered everything, the floors, the stacked bricks, the columns reflecting shafts of light of sea, until the niches filled with statues and she could press her back against a pedestal and watch mock naval battles spill out across the brackish water like frescoes. Bright yellow sails tilting like seesaws, slaves playing soldier, grapes bursting in her mouth as the first ship sunk. But that wasn't what she'd come to see. She'd come to see a villa ruined, the final bricks, to wonder what fragments of herself would last, or, at least, to learn how to crumble so beautifully.